Developing Tomorrow's Leaders with Coach T. Educating, supporting, inspiring, and empowering the next generation of leaders. Coach T's guest in this episode is Elena Perella, a pioneering leader and developer of the new human being, which empowers us to evolve into new human beings and consciously shape our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors in a balanced and healthy manner.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Developing Tomorrow's Leaders with yours truly, Coach T, or Antoine Thompson. I am a youth personal growth and development coach, and this podcast is all about those that have the ability, willingness, and experience to contribute to developing tomorrow's leaders. And my guest today is not only a guest, but also a friend of mine and a member of my exclusive group, which is the Village of Inspiration, group of individuals that put others before themselves. And I hope you all will help me welcome Elena Perella to Developing Tomorrow's Leaders. How are you, Elena?
I'm good. Hi, Antoine. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Always great to have friends on because I know it's going to be a great conversation. And as I mentioned previously, being a part of a Village of Inspiration is all about giving more of yourself than most people do. And I think that's something that you truly do. And I'm inspired by the work that you do. And I really am excited about having you on. And I know that we're going to get right to, because what you do and work with people on is so important. And that is overcoming obstacles in past lives for young people, as well as for adults and things that they've gone through in their lives. And so before we start, I'd love for you to tell us a little about you that we don't know.
Okay, that you don't know. Well, what can I share with you? I have recently launched a new project, The New Human Being. And as a pioneering leader, I'm guiding people to evolve into a new species of new human beings, which are individuals like you and I, completely free from generational toxic influences and emotionally detached from the system that governs us and that pilots our behaviors.
Yeah, I love that. The new human being, that is so appropriate in the times that we live in, because we have truly become really disconnected with the things that really matter and the things that drive us to be the best versions of ourselves, if you will. And it takes a lot of resolve, courage, and uh, energy and time for you to do that. So I really appreciate you doing that. But you mentioned about pioneering leader. I mean, that's truly, I think it's what you're doing with this project. So with that, um, when you talk about damaging influence of family and how we free ourselves, I know that you have personal experience from this as well. And I would love for you to share a little of that. So I think our listeners can really start to connect the dots as we progress through our conversation.
Yes, because the damaging influence of family is crucial to evolve into new human beings, or better said, eliminating that influence is crucial to evolve into new human beings. You know, I think that most of us are born with inherited toxicity. I call it our family's toxic emotional inheritance. And it's a baggage that is full of generational faults, but also toxic emotions, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, inclinations. And it is fueled by the pain of our emotional wounds that our parents caused us, unfortunately, unconsciously or not. Many parents did that and do that. And all this is fueled by the harmful influence of the system that governs us with its narratives that are very harmful for us, for our behavior. And so I guide people to eliminate that toxic influence of family, so that they solve most of their problems, because really most of our problems are caused by the influence of our family, the damaging influence of our family.
Right. I can totally relate to that, because I think some of the examples that you're referring to, I mean, you think about people that are in abusive relationships, and then or abusive families growing up, and then they evolve into being a part of another abusive relationship. It could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be psychological. There's so many different things, but they practice what they learn. And I think that's what you're talking about, is breaking that pattern of dysfunction is probably the best word to use from that, is breaking up dysfunction. Would you agree?
Exactly. It's a dysfunction. I experienced that. For example, I was in a relationship with a narcissist, psychopath, and sociopath, and I was repeating my grandmother's history or story, painful story that was passed on to me by my mother, who was in a very unhappy marriage. And, uh, and then I manifested it even worse than my mother. And so, and it's not only that, problems like, for example, unhealthy behaviors. If you overeat, there is a family influence, toxic influence, that is making you displaying that behavior, because, you know, we are not so stupid to sabotage ourselves. I don't believe in that anymore. We are made to sabotage ourselves by those toxic influences.
Yeah. I think not being exposed to more positive influence outside of that immediate circle prevents people from learning. Like you said, we don't purposely sabotage ourselves. We sabotage ourselves based on the previous experience, because you only practice what you know. So if you only know one way, you're only going to do things one way. And I think this is why it's so important talking about the new human being, meaning we get to decide our own futures and our own paths. And whether we succeed immediately or later on, we get to make those decisions for ourselves. And we get to go, hey, I like this, it works, or it doesn't work. And you have the freedom to make that change to make your life a lot better.
Well, positive influences from the environment can help, but it's not how can I say, it's not enough often. It's not enough, because we have to really dive into our inner world to be ready to do that, and cleanse it from the inside. I know many people, for example, that use affirmations to help themselves be positive, stay positive, and so they do have an attitude that is optimistic, but they always need those affirmations or meditation, for example, to maintain that attitude. Because if they stop doing affirmation and meditation, then they fall into the trap again. Why? Because they are working on the surface. They are not diving into themselves to eradicate the root cause. And so, yes, also be surrounded by positive people is good. But is the person who is suffering ready to go further and inside and make that positive influence work inside themselves so that they eradicate the root cause? If yes, that's fantastic, because it's going to work. If no, that positive influence won't be so beneficial.
The key word you said there, or phrase I should say, the root cause. I think that that's what's really important to focus on. And from even from my perspective, something I didn't talk about for years was my upbringing. My father was not my biological father, but he was my father as far as I'm concerned, because he raised me. But he was abusive to my mom. He wasn't a good father to my brother and I. But it took me years to realize the impact that he had on my life, but also dismissing my biological father, but realizing that experience led me to be the man I am today, because I chose to break that pattern, not to be that, because of the influence that my father had on myself and my brothers. And this is one of the reasons you and I are having a conversation, is because I want to continue to inspire people to make their own paths, which is what you're doing. So I just wanted to kind of share that personal anecdote, because what you're talking about is very true. You have a choice, and I made a choice, and it's one that I'm really proud of that I've done. But it also shows me that you can do whatever you choose to do if you put your mind and your heart and soul into it.
Yeah, and I would like to make this clear about choices. We have the choice only if we awake. from your experience, from what you're telling me, I can see, I can feel that you were awake. You understood where the problems were coming from, and you chose to break that pattern. But if you're not awake, you don't have any choice. You don't have any choice. We don't choose. Everything is chosen for us. Whether it's family, the system, we really don't choose our behavior.
But so that leads to a question that I'll ask you too is, in the processes of breaking that and being awake to know these things, you mentioned affirmations and being able to be consistent with that. It's great to listen or read affirmations, but you made a point of, you must be consistent with it in order to not only break the pattern, but be consistently moving in the right direction, once you make that choice. Are there other ways in your experience? Because I know that you've done some research in the past and been involved with some very sensitive situations where you've been a part of that transformation for people. Do you have other examples of how people can be consistent with making those changes?
Well, once you awake, and you become free to choose, and you don't even need affirmation or meditation or other tools to change. The choice is enough, and then you let it happen. And you can challenge yourself, for example, to do what your family always thought you weren't able to do. In my case, my family, my mother, my father, always made me believe that I was a failure as a person. And once I woke up, I chose to prove them wrong by challenging myself and following my passions. And so I broke those cycles, and I freed myself from the limitation that they imposed on me and the fears that I inherited from my mother of choosing for herself. I was afraid of choosing for myself. But once I awoke, I thought, no, 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 this is not going to happen. And I will challenge myself if necessary.
So
So go ahead.
affirmation, meditations can be good, but for example, for many years, I think more than a decade, I didn't do that at all, and still I evolved. I broke toxic patterns. I eliminated a lot of toxicity just by investigating my inner world and allowing myself, for example, to cry, to be sad, to be angry, to vent, actually, to express my sadness for what's happened to me when I was a child and for what I had inherited from my parents then. Yeah.
What I do want to ask you if you don't mind, but what was the breaking point for you to make the change for yourself? I mean, you mentioned the narcissistic relationship that you were in. What really was the breaking point? What made you really realize, hey, I have to make this change. I have to break this cycle.
Oh, many years before the toxic relationship. I was 19 years old and my father died. And that was, next to be a tragedy, next of being a tragedy for me, because I actually never had a good relationship with him. Actually, he never built a relationship with me. And so it left me with a void inside and in my life. It marked also a turning point, because when he died, I awoke. It was as if a veil was dropped from my eyes, and I began to see reality for what it is. I saw that I was a toxic product of my family. I didn't inherit it. I didn't inherit only the good, but I inherited also the toxic from them. And it was then that I could make free choices, really. I thought, okay, this is why I have had all these problems. And so when I was 19, I began a process of internal cleansing and evolution that saw me manifesting the toxicity from my family and eliminating the root cause. So I was doing both.
And manifesting the toxicity wasn't really my choice. I was made by the toxicity to suffer, for example, from eating disorders. This was also something inherited. Experiencing depression. And the last one was domestic abuse. Yeah, I was aware while experiencing those stories, and this is why I could also do the inner work to eliminate the root cause. For example, victimhood. I inherited that from my mother and my grandmother. And being so, this is also why I always say, yeah, of course, I wasn't responsible for my ex-partner's behavior. It was his problem. But in some way, I knew that I allowed him, a violent man, in my life. And so I thought, okay, of course, I can blame him for what he's doing to me, but how come that I allowed this man in my life? And so I investigated inside myself, and I found victimhood coming from my grandmother. I found my father's also tendencies to, for example, please people, and the fact that for my father I was completely invisible because he was a very busy businessman, and so he wasn't interested in family, in creating bonds with his daughter. He wasn't there. And there was a lack of communication with him. And so there was a lack of love.
Yeah.
And so I understood that. And of course, if you don't love yourself, how can you attract a man or a woman who loves you? Actually, what happens, not only you attract people who are abusive, but if someone who wants to love you approaches you, you reject him or her because you don't know what love is. You are scared. You feel a kind of challenge or threat, and you reject him.
But you mentioned something when you said when your father passed away, it was like a big burden was lifted.
Mhm.
I I totally resonated, but as soon as you said that, it was almost like it's the unsaid thing was removed, right? You knew it, but you didn't know it until it was gone, and it was like a revelation that oh, this is the first step in making the right choices for me. Is
Yeah,
that a fair assessment?
exactly. Yes, I could see now finally where I was coming from. And I could see that not only that, and my behavior and the difficulties that I had with myself, I simply didn't love myself because nobody loved me. My parents never loved me. And I also could see toxic dynamics in family. I could, little by little, I became also aware of the harmful influence of the system. But for example, when I was suffering from eating disorders, I was not only manifesting family's toxicity, but I was also expressing the pain for the emotional wounds that I had that was fueled. All this was fueled by the influence of the system because it was in the 90s, 80s, 90s, that, for example, the image of the ideal woman was thin, blonde, and tall. And you had to be this to be accepted. And so this influence fueled the pain that I was experiencing, and so my toxic behavior.
The systematic acceptance, guidelines. You outlined it. Thin, blonde, tall, whatever. But the other thing, going back, where you were talking about loving yourself. Somebody's approaching you, trying to express their interest, but you don't know how to receive that because you can't receive it if you don't know yourself and don't
Mhm.
love yourself first. And that was something else I mentally meant to come back to, but that truly is a big part of it too. Is you can't embrace something outside of yourself if you don't understand who you are first and foremost. And you're talking about experiences over your lifetime, and it kind of brings us back to the work that you're doing. Regardless of what's transpired in your past, it does in fact affect your future. Yeah, it used to be, your past doesn't have to determine your future. And what you're saying is your past does impact your future because you can't forget those things because they are part of your evolution as an individual.
What I see, what I experienced and understood is actually that the past, we can close the chapter, and painful past, I would say, generational problems and challenges actually do not help us evolve. They delay our evolution, they delay our personal growth, they weaken us and impoverish all aspects of our lives. I know that we believe that if you suffer, if you experience pain, then you become stronger and better, and it's not true. It's not true. And we are brainwashed with this because if we suffer, we cannot concentrate on personal growth, development, evolution. It's a distraction. We concentrate on the suffering, on our situation. Often we get lost in it. We close ourselves in shells, and we don't pay attention to what happens around us. And this is dangerous because we become puppets in the hands of a system that doesn't care at all about us. And so we find in this case in a state of slavery, mental slavery. And if we eliminate that suffering, it is as if we eliminate a cloud inside, and then we make room for our strength, our wisdom, our essence to shine. Really, what we need to know about ourselves and life, what we need to know is written inside of us. I call it instruction manual, okay? We have that inside of us. It is clouded by the generational toxicity, by the damaging influence of our family. And there comes a point that we have to understand this so that we don't pass it on to our children and we spare them from going through unnecessary suffering.
This, while you're just explaining that, the question that popped in my head was, where do you see now, and this is ties into what you're doing too, is how do you break that cycle when you are a parent in a dysfunctional family, but you don't want your child to carry that dysfunction to their family when they get older? I mean, I know this is part of what you're working, so I wanted to kind of pose that question because I think that's a big one for listeners to walk away with knowing, hey, I'm aware of the situation, but now I have insight and the tools that I need to break that cycle.
Well, the first thing is to be honest with yourself. Just admit that you have a toxic influence coming from your family, and take the right actions to free yourself so that you can guide also your children in freeing themselves.
I think it's being willing to step up, to stand up and
Yeah.
say, hey, can't continue. I recall having a conversation with my brother years ago, and we were talking specifically about this topic. And, he goes, the things we do because we were taught this, and we were taught this because our parents were taught this way, and they were taught by their parents that way. So you only know one way. So when you start looking at things that you want, I can't have that because I wasn't taught to have that. Uh, that really encompasses what this conversation is also about, is you don't have to be limited by your experiences that you've had in the past or that you're going through. They don't have to determine what happens, and you have to be willing. It takes a strong individual. It's almost like what you're doing, being a pioneering leader. You know that there's always going to be pitfalls in making that decision. There's always going to be naysayers when you stand up and go, hey, that's enough. Well, you can't break the cycle. This is what we do. Well, it takes a strong individual to do that. And I think the other thing that's important about the work you're doing too is empowering people to be willing to stand up and say, hey, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm not going to be an enabler. I'm going to be the
Yeah.
one that's going to change the pattern. I'm going to break the cycle. I'm going to be the pioneer for our next generation of our family. And I think this is so inspiring because there are a lot of parents that are maybe listening to this going, oh man, this sounds like what I'm in. Am I strong enough to be the pioneer to break the cycle? And the answer is yes, you are. You just have to be willing to do that. And I think that that's what's so important about you and your project of the new, creating a new human being.
Exactly. And I think that I know that many parents are, they find it difficult to admit it, to admit that they are the cause of their children's problems. And I know it's difficult, it's painful, because how can I, mother or father, be the cause of my children's problems? It's horrible. I know it's difficult, but it is what it is. So we have that, we do that unconsciously, unwillingly, but it happens. And so since we know that it happens, that we do that, even if unconsciously, why don't make the choice and say, hey, okay, I am doing this to my children. I've passed them on this toxicity, these inclinations, these unresolved childhood issues. So I don't want to continue. I want to help them break it, break the cycle, and by doing it for myself as first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and I think it does take a strong person to do it. And I think you're right. There are a lot of parents that know the situations they're in, and they want to break it, but they don't know how. And this conversation is to remind you that you do have the ability to make that change.
I don't know if you are aware of the discussion that is now going on around AI, the future of humanity. The new human being is the answer to probable threats that are coming from artificial intelligence, for example, and less value being human. Let's value being human. Let's enhance our potential beyond our imagination, because we can do so much more than we think, you know. And we really have to begin to know ourselves in a different way, change our approach to life, and connect again and stronger with each other. We are losing trust. If we lose trust because we are losing trust in ourselves, we won't trust each other anymore. What is going to happen then? That we will be isolated completely. And you know, when people are isolated, everybody can take control on you. And I propose a different approach. Technology is useful, fantastic. We have to master it. How? Evolving into new human beings. This is the answer. This is the answer to the future. A future that is coming, because they are talking already about next year, next 5 years.
That's a whole different topic for me because I have these conversations a lot, and I think about the evolution of society, of government, of every aspect of our lives, and even entertainment's a big part of it. And then it trickles back to kids and the impact it has on young people, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. And a big part of it is AI. What AI does is it limits the young people's ability to use their
Mm-hmm.
cognitive
Yep.
skills and their critical thinking skills because they go to the easy answer. The more you go to the easy answer, the less you think. The less you think, the less you become who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. And I think it's really important. And this may seem weird, but I'm just going to put this out as the example. I'm not a young man, so I've seen a lot of things over the years. And when I would look at TV shows, and I listen to music, and I watched the evolution of music and the evolution of entertainment, I can go back and watch TV shows that I watched growing up, and they're still funny to me today, even though they could not be shown on TV today because of how sensitive we've become as a society that we don't know how to distinguish between humor and reality
Mhm,
and
mhm,
entertainment and reality. So that's just one aspect. And then you think about how music has changed. It used to be all about, you could take a dance tune, could be a love song. It was entertaining. And ballads are not like they used to be. They used to be about love and the importance of love and how important it was. Now when you listen to a song that's supposed to be about love, it's all surrounded around sex and violence. Well, that's what young people are thinking love is sex and violence. And that goes back to the dysfunction and domestic violence in relationships, because that's what they equate love to. So these are the kind of, they may seem little things to some people, but to me they're big, because I look at it as a big development in the wrong direction.
mhm. You are right. These are big changes. They are not small things that you cannot consider, and they are not, no, no, these are big changes and they are not spontaneous changes.
Yes,
So
yes,
we really have to wake up now to make sure that we have to change direction, and not everybody will be able to do it because of this familiar influencing, toxic influence. This is key. Awake, eliminate the familial, influence, toxic, what is toxic, and emotionally detached from the system. This is key. This is why I talk about the family and generational toxic influences, because it's this toxicity that the system uses to hook you and keep you in a state of mental slavery, to influence your behavior, your choices, everything in your life. You awake, eliminate this toxic influence, you become free. You become free. You detach emotionally from the system. You will continue to coexist with it, but without being part of it.
yeah. I will add one more to what I mentioned, because what you just said is spot on. There was a comedian, he's since passed, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. But his name is George Carlin. Uh,
That's fantastic that you met. It's not a coincidence. I just today I watched two videos of him. I never heard of him.
oh,
I watched two videos. I thought, who is this man? Fantastic. He knew it.
yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. He's years ahead of his time, and everything we're talking about, he was talking about 20, 25 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, he knew what was happening.
Nobody listened to him
Yeah.
then.
And what was great about it, it goes back to what I was saying before. It was entertainment what he was doing, but it was also education,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which one do you remember which one you saw?
Oh,
What it's about? Because there's
it
so many.
yeah, it was one about the system and
You
how it
don't have a
influenced how.
choice.
Yeah, you don't have a
You don't have a
choice.
choice.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was
yeah.
also talking about voting, elections, and
Right.
power manipulation.
Oh yeah, his
Yeah,
whole comedy was all based on that. So I would urge you to continue watching those, because
I will.
they are, and I think they're also will contribute to the work you're doing, because I think you'll find
Mhm.
a lot of similarities to what he's talking about, and you can reference that. But he was so far ahead of his time, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are actually even going back to it and saying that it's amazing how somebody could understand the system, and what you're talking about now could understand it years ago, but we weren't awake
No.
to take it for what it was worth. He was entertaining us, but he was also trying to educate us, and we
Mhm.
only took away the entertainment part. We didn't take away the educational part that he was trying to share. So I think
Exactly.
the work you're
Exactly.
doing is really important.
Yeah, and the other video now that we're talking, it was about planet Earth, climate change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep,
Yes.
he sure was, and I think he ended that one talking about, "Oh, so we do all this stuff, and you're worried about saving plastic bags." I think that's
Yes.
what he yeah,
That's the one. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
And he
yeah,
said, you know what? Planet Earth is going to be okay.
yeah,
It's us who are
you know?
Yeah, we're the cause. Yeah, we're the ones doing the damage, and
Yeah.
it's just so amazing. But really, if you really break it down, what he's saying is, you keep things simple. It's so arrogant of us to think that we have that much power over the planet, and it's
Yeah.
been here long before we got here. It'll be here long after we're gone. It's going to be fine. We're the ones
Mhm.
that are not going to be fine if we don't get our act
Exactly.
together, right?
Exactly. Exactly. We could pollute and contaminate less, of course. That would be fantastic. But I think that it got a point. Yeah.
Oh, he definitely
Yeah.
has a point.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
question about that.
Yeah.
But well, Elena, this has been great conversation,
Mm.
and I want you before we go. I have a question for you. As I always ask all my guests, if you would share with us the person or persons that have been most influential in your life, and why.
In my life, there are authors and experts, like, for example, on behavioral biology, Robert Sapolsky. He really educated me in this, understanding how biology influences our behavior, and confirmed also the fact that from generation to generation we pass influences. No, our behavior is not just what we do in the present moment. It has a history. And there is also Mauro Biglino. He's an expert on the Bible and history of religions. He's awakening people around that. And there is in English, it would be a molecular biologist, an Italian expert who is paving the way with an hypothesis on our evolution. It's a third hypothesis next to the creationist and the evolutionary theory of Darwin. There is a lot of discussion around this. So they are very, very important for me because they are not only giving me more information about what I am passionate about, human evolution, but also confirming all what I thought about humans and our lives and the world. So I'm very grateful for all these people. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. No, thank you for sharing that. And like I said, there's no right or wrong. I always find it interesting to find out the different individuals and people that influence everybody. And it's great to know that it goes to show you that it's not always just family members. It's not always extended families. It can be totally from outside. And it goes back to what we've been talking about for this episode is about, influences. They don't all have to be internal, they can be external, but being consistent with the interaction with those influences helps you in the direction and path that you want to go. So,
Yes, and very important is to once one begins to cleanse themselves from the inside, then you will also clearly see what is wrong and what is right, what is the truth and what is the lie, so that you will understand even more what this is all about.
yeah.
Yeah.
100% correct. So, what would you like to share with us how our listeners can follow you? We're going to be,
Mhm.
for those that are watching this, I'm going to put your website up here. If you can want to share other ways that they can get in touch with you.
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, quite active, and then I'm also on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. Well, Elena, always a pleasure to talk with you. And of course, we will stay in touch. But I really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time and wish you all the best with your projects and your work. And keep up the great work because it's something that's richly needed. And I applaud you for doing it.
Thank you so much.
And also, don't forget to tune into the other podcast that I co-host with my youth leadership and empowerment co-host Keith Center. Our podcast Teen Speak, where we interview middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students, where they share their challenges that they've overcome, but more importantly, the strategies that they've used to overcome those. So that podcast is Teen Speak, Empowering Today's Youth, and you can find that on your favorite podcast channel. As always, I am Coach T. I'm here to educate and support and inspire the next generation of leaders. With that, we shall see you in our next episode. Take care.
If your school, organization, or club is looking for a motivational, supportive, and inspirational speaker, Coach T is your man.